What if the most important moment in history was first witnessed by someone no one expected? And when she spoke, no one believed her. That detail is not small. It's uncomfortable. Because if this story were shaped to convince people, it would begin differently. It would start with strength, with authority, with someone whose voice carried weight the moment they spoke. There would be no room for doubt, no space for questions, no reason to hesitate. But that's not what we find. Instead, the story begins in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles after something final has taken place. Jerusalem has already witnessed the crucifixion. The noise, the shouting, the public intensity, it has all faded. What remains is a city returning to routine, while something deeper lingers beneath the surface. From every visible perspective, it is over. Jesus is dead. His body has been removed from the cross, wrapped carefully, and placed inside a tomb carved into stone. A heavy rock seals the entrance. Guards are positioned to ensure nothing interferes. The situation is not uncertain. It is contained, controlled, and closed. And yet, beneath that sense of closure, there is confusion, not in the city, but among those who followed him. They are not preparing for anything extraordinary. They are not gathering in anticipation of what comes next. They are scattered, quiet, trying to process what they have just witnessed. The expectations they carried have collapsed. The future they imagined no longer exists. And when expectations collapse, clarity rarely replaces them immediately. This is the emotional setting in which the next moment begins. Not confidence, not belief, but uncertainty. Before the sun fully rises, while the city is still holding on to the last moments of night, one person moves toward the tomb. There's no announcement, no audience, no sense that what is about to happen carries historical weight. It is simply Mary Magdalene. And that choice alone begins to challenge expectation. Because if you were constructing this story to persuade, you would not begin with her. You would choose someone whose words would not be questioned, someone whose position would validate the moment. But instead, the first movement toward the center of this event comes from someone whose presence feels personal, not strategic. Mary is not approaching the tomb with expectation. She is approaching it with grief. That distinction matters, because it means she is not looking for something extraordinary. She is not searching for proof of anything. She is going to remain close to what she has lost. That is a deeply human response. When something meaningful ends, distance feels wrong. You move closer, even when there is nothing left to change. As she walks, there is no indication that anything unusual has already taken place. No visible sign that the story has shifted. Everything, from her perspective, is exactly as it should be after a death. Until she sees the stone, it is no longer where it belongs. That is the first disruption, and it is not subtle. The stone was large, deliberately placed, and difficult to move. Its position represented finality, and yet now, that finality has been interrupted. It has been moved completely, exposing the entrance. At that moment, her mind does not move toward belief. It moves toward explanation. Because when something breaks expectation, the first instinct is not to assume the extraordinary. It is to search for something that makes sense. She steps closer, looks inside, and what she finds deepens the confusion rather than resolving it. The tomb is empty. There is no body, no immediate evidence explaining why, no clear direction pointing toward what has happened. Just absence. And absence, in moments like this, does not feel hopeful. It feels like loss repeated, but in a different form. What she believed she understood has now been taken away again, replaced with something she cannot yet define. Her response is immediate. She runs, not slowly, not thoughtfully, but urgently, driven by the need to communicate what she has just seen. And when she reaches the disciples, her words reflect her understanding clearly. They have taken him, and we don't know where they have put him. That sentence reveals everything. There is no mention of resurrection, no suggestion of something beyond explanation. From her perspective, this is still a problem, not a revelation. The disciples respond within that same framework. They move toward the tomb to verify what she has said. They look, they observe, they notice that something is different. The linen cloths are there. The space where the body should be is empty. But observation does not immediately produce understanding. They see, but they do not yet comprehend. And then they leave. That decision feels small, but it carries weight. Because leaving creates distance, it allows the moment to remain unresolved. It gives space to think, but also space to step away from what cannot be explained. Mary does not leave. She stays. And that is where everything begins to shift. Because staying requires something different than belief. It requires presence in uncertainty. It means remaining in a moment that offers no clarity, no answers, and no immediate sense of direction. She stands outside the tomb, and the emotional weight settles fully. This is not just confusion anymore. It is confusion layered on top of grief, and that combination has a way of keeping you still, even when nothing makes sense. She looks again, and this time, the scene is no longer the same. What she's about to encounter will not align with her expectations, her assumptions, or her understanding of what is possible. And this is where the story begins to move beyond explanation into something that challenges every natural conclusion she has made so far. But before that moment unfolds, pause and consider this carefully. If you were standing there, seeing the stone moved and the tomb empty, what would your first conclusion be? Would you assume something extraordinary had happened? Or would you search for a logical explanation, just as she did? Write your answer in the comments, because how you answer that question says more than you might think. Stay with this, because what happens next does not simply answer the question. It changes the way the question is asked. There's a detail in this moment that is easy to overlook, but once you see it, it changes how you understand everything that follows. Mary is standing at the tomb, overwhelmed, confused, and still trying to process what she believes has happened. The body is gone. The explanation she formed makes sense to her, even if it doesn't bring comfort. Someone has taken him. That is the only conclusion that fits within what she knows. And yet, she does not leave. That decision, quiet, almost unnoticed, is what places her in the exact position to experience what no one else sees first, because while others observed and stepped away, she remained. And remaining in a moment like this is not easy. It requires staying inside uncertainty without resolution. It requires facing something that does not yet make sense without the option of turning it into something understandable. She leans forward and looks into the tomb again, but this time, what she sees is different. Two figures are sitting where the body had been, one at the head, one at the feet. They are not reacting with urgency. They are not moving with confusion. They are simply present, and they ask her a question. Why are you crying? It's a simple question, but it carries weight, because it invites her to express what she believes is true, not what is actually happening. And her answer reflects her understanding clearly. They have taken my Lord, and I don't know where they have put him. There is still no shift in her thinking, no recognition, no awareness that she is standing inside something far greater than what she assumes. This is important because it shows that being close to the moment does not automatically mean understanding the moment. You can be standing at the center of something extraordinary and still interpret it through ordinary assumptions. And that is exactly where she is. Then she turns and sees someone standing behind her, but she does not recognize him. That detail is not accidental. Because it reveals something about how recognition works, it is not always immediate. It is not always obvious. Sometimes, even when the truth is directly in front of you, it remains hidden until something shifts internally. He asks her the same question. Why are you crying? Who are you looking for? The repetition matters, because it keeps her anchored in her current understanding. She answers the only way she knows how. She assumes he is the gardener. And that assumption feels reasonable. It fits the environment. It fits the moment. It does not require her to rethink everything she believes. Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him. There is no hesitation in her voice, no expectation that anything beyond this explanation exists. And then, without any dramatic buildup, without any visible display of power, everything changes in a single moment. He says her name, Mary. That's it. Not a speech, not an explanation, just her name. And suddenly, Recognition breaks through. The voice, the tone, the familiarity. It connects instantly. What she could not understand through sight, she recognizes through relationship. And in that moment, everything she assumed begins to collapse. She sees him, not as a possibility, not as an idea, but as reality, alive, standing in front of her. The one she believed was gone is no longer absent. And that realization is not gradual, it is immediate. Rabboni, teacher. The word carries both recognition and emotion. It is not just a title, it is a response to something deeply personal. She is not simply identifying him, she is reconnecting with him. Now pause here, because this is the moment the entire story hinges on. The resurrection is no longer theoretical, it is experienced. But notice how it happens, not through a public announcement, not through a large gathering, not through a display designed to remove doubt instantly. It happens in a quiet exchange between two individuals, and the first witness is someone who was not chosen for credibility but was present enough to experience it. That challenges expectation, because it suggests that the moment was not structured for immediate acceptance. It was structured as it happened, and that distinction matters. Now listen carefully to what happens next, because this is where responsibility enters the story. Jesus gives her a directive. Go and tell them. Simple, clear, direct. And yet, the weight of that instruction is significant. She is now being asked to carry information that no one else has experienced yet, to speak about something that will sound impossible, to deliver a message that will not immediately be believed. And still, she goes. This is where the role of a witness becomes clear. A witness is not defined by whether others accept what they say. A witness is defined by what they have seen, and she has seen enough to move. She returns to the disciples, and she tells them, I have seen the Lord. Those words are direct, confident, different from her first statement. Before, she said, they have taken him. Now, she says, I have seen him. That shift reflects transformation. She is no longer speaking from assumption. She is speaking from experience. But here is where the story becomes even more real. They do not believe her, not immediately, not fully. Her words do not produce instant agreement. Instead, they are met with hesitation, doubt, uncertainty. And that reaction is important because it removes the idea that belief was automatic. Even those closest to the story struggle to accept it at first. And that raises a deeper question. If this moment is true, why does it unfold in a way that allows doubt to exist? Why not remove all uncertainty at once? Why not present the resurrection in a way that forces immediate belief? The answer is not stated directly, but it is implied through how the moment unfolds. Because what we are seeing is not a controlled presentation. It is a real sequence of events experienced by real people responding in real ways. Confusion, recognition, doubt, acceptance. All of it exists within the same story, and that complexity makes it harder to dismiss, not easier. Now think about this carefully. The first witness sees, speaks, and is not immediately believed. And yet, that does not change what she saw. Truth, in this moment, does not depend on immediate acceptance. It stands on its own. So here's something worth asking yourself. If you were in that room hearing her say, I have seen him, how would you respond? Would you believe her? Or would you need to see it for yourself? Write your answer in the comments, because your response to that question reveals how you process something that challenges your understanding. Stay with this, because what happens next does not just expand the story, it deepens it, and begins to show why this moment was never meant to stay hidden. There's something about human nature that becomes very clear in moments like this. Seeing is powerful, but even seeing is not always enough. There is something uncomfortable about what happens next, and it's something most people don't expect. The first person to witness the resurrection delivers the message clearly, directly, without hesitation. I have seen the Lord. There is no confusion left in her voice, no uncertainty in her words. She is no longer describing a problem. She is describing a reality. And yet, That clarity does not produce immediate belief. It produces resistance. Now think about that carefully. This is not a stranger speaking. This is someone they know, someone who has been present, someone who is not disconnected from the events that just unfolded. And still, her words are not enough. That moment reveals something deeply human. People do not accept extraordinary truth easily, especially when it disrupts what they have already accepted as final. The disciples had already processed the crucifixion as the end. They had already adjusted their thinking to loss, to closure, to the idea that whatever they hoped for had come to an abrupt stop. And once the mind settles into that conclusion, reversing it is not simple. So when Mary speaks, she is not just sharing information. She is challenging a conclusion they have already accepted. And that is where tension begins to build. Because now the question is no longer, what happened? But can this be true? Some listen, but internally resist. Others remain uncertain, caught between what they are hearing and what they believe is possible. And this moment is critical, because it shows that the resurrection was not received as an obvious truth, even by those closest to it. It had to confront doubt first. Now consider why that matters. If belief were immediate, if everyone accepted her words without hesitation, the story would feel different. It would feel controlled, simplified, easier to explain. But instead, what we see is hesitation, resistance, and the need for personal confirmation. That makes the moment more real, not less, because it reflects how people actually respond when something challenges their understanding at the deepest level. While this is happening, something else is unfolding beneath the surface. Mary has already crossed a line that the others have not. She has moved from assumption to experience. She is no longer trying to figure out what happened. She has seen it. And it places her in a different position, not because she is more important, but because she stayed long enough to encounter what others missed. That detail continues to matter, because the difference between seeing and not seeing in this moment is not intelligence, not strength, not authority. It is proximity and persistence. Now imagine the atmosphere among the disciples. The room is closed, the tone is cautious, the conversation is uncertain. Fear is still present. The memory of the crucifixion has not faded. The possibility that they could be targeted next is real. And into that environment comes a message that sounds impossible. A message that, if true, changes everything. But if false, only deepens confusion. That is the tension they are sitting in, and this is where something important begins to take shape. Truth does not force itself into their understanding. It does not overwhelm them all at once. Instead, it begins at the edge with one witness, and then slowly moves inward. Not everyone receives it at the same time. Not everyone processes it the same way. And that layered experience reveals something deeper about how transformative moments actually unfold. They are not always immediate. They are often progressive. Now step back and look at the pattern forming here. First, there is loss, then confusion, then an unexpected discovery, then a personal encounter, then a message, and now, doubt. That sequence is not random. It mirrors how people move from disbelief to understanding. It is not a straight line. It is a process. And this raises another question. Why was the first witness someone whose words would be questioned? Why not begin with someone who could remove doubt instantly? Because if the goal were immediate acceptance, that is exactly how it would have been structured. But that is not what we see. Instead, we see something that unfolds naturally, without adjusting itself to meet human expectations of credibility. And that makes the story harder to manipulate, not easier. Mary's role now becomes even more significant. She is not just the first to see, she is the first to speak. And speaking in a moment like this requires something different than certainty. It requires courage, because she knows how this sounds. She understands the weight of what she is saying. And still, she says it. That tells you something about what she experienced. It was strong enough to overcome the fear of being dismissed. And that brings the focus back to a central idea. The resurrection was not first presented as a public event designed to convince the masses. It was experienced personally, then communicated, then questioned, then gradually understood. That progression matters because it shows that belief, in this case, is not based on pressure or control. It is based on encounter and response. Now think about your own perspective for a moment. When you hear something that challenges what you believe, what is your first reaction? Do you accept it immediately, or do you resist it until you can see it for yourself? That reaction is not unique. It is exactly what is happening here. The disciples are not rejecting her out of indifference. They are responding the way most people would when faced with something that does not fit within their current understanding. And yet, the story does not stop here. Because what began with one witness is about to expand, not in theory, but in experience. And as it expands, the doubt that filled the room will begin to confront something it cannot easily dismiss. So here is something to consider carefully. If truth does not always arrive in a way that feels convincing at first, how do you recognize it when it does? Is it through authority, through repetition, or through something more personal? Write your answer in the comments, because this question sits at the center of everything that is unfolding. Stay with this, because what comes next does not remove doubt instantly, but it does begin to confront it in a way that changes how the entire story is understood. Doubt has now settled into the room, not loudly, but firmly, like something people are not ready to let go of. The message has been delivered, the claim has been made, and yet nothing outward has changed. The doors are still closed. The fear is still present. The uncertainty has not disappeared. And this is where the story becomes even more difficult to ignore, because what happens next does not come through explanation, argument, or persuasion. It comes through encounter. The disciples are gathered together, not in confidence, but in caution. Every decision they make is shaped by what just happened days earlier. They saw what power can do. They saw how quickly things can turn. And now they are trying to stay unnoticed, trying to stay safe, trying to understand what they are supposed to do next. Mary's words are still in the air, but they have not yet become reality for them. They are something heard, not something experienced. And then, without warning, the situation shifts. Jesus appears among them, not announced, not introduced, not explained, present, standing in the same space where fear had been controlling everything just moments before. This is not what they expected. This is not something they prepared for. And because of that, their first reaction is not relief. It is shock, even fear, because when something impossible becomes visible, the mind does not immediately accept it. It hesitates. It questions. It searches for another explanation. He speaks, "Peace be with you." That statement is not just a greeting. It addresses the exact condition they are in. Fear, confusion, tension. All of it is met with a single phrase that attempts to settle what they are feeling internally. But words alone are not enough in a moment like this, because what they are seeing does not yet align with what they believe. So he shows them his hands, his side, the marks, evidence, not just presence. And that is when the shift begins, because now what they are experiencing is no longer just visual. It becomes tangible, real. The same one they saw crucified is now standing in front of them, carrying the marks of what happened, but no longer controlled by it. And that detail matters deeply, because it connects the past to the present in a way that cannot be dismissed as imagination or confusion. The reaction changes. Fear begins to give way to recognition. Doubt begins to lose its hold. Not because they were convinced through argument, but because they encountered something that replaced uncertainty with reality. Now, pause here, because this moment answers a question that has been building since the beginning. Why didn't everyone believe immediately when Mary spoke? Because this story does not remove doubt before experience. It allows doubt to exist until it is confronted. And now it is being confronted directly. But even here, something else happens that continues to reveal how real this moment is. Not everyone is present. Thomas is missing. And that absence becomes important, because when the others tell him what they have now experienced, "We have seen the Lord," he responds the same way they responded to Mary, with doubt. "Unless I see, unless I touch, I will not believe." That response is not unusual. It is consistent. It shows that doubt is not limited to one person or one moment. It is part of the process. It appears again, even after others have already moved beyond it. And that repetition reinforces something important. This is not a controlled narrative designed to eliminate hesitation. It is a sequence of real reactions unfolding step by step. Days later, the moment repeats. The disciples are together again. This time Thomas is with them. And once again, without warning, Jesus appears. Same presence, same calm, same authority. Peace be with you. But this time, the focus shifts directly to the one who doubted. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. There is no rejection in his voice, no frustration, just invitation, an opportunity to move from doubt to understanding. And Thomas responds, "My Lord and my God." That statement is not casual. It is the result of direct encounter. The same pattern appears again. Doubt, followed by experience, followed by recognition. Now step back and look at the full picture forming here. The first witness sees and is not believed. The others hear and doubt. Then they see and believe. Another hears and doubts, then sees and believes. This progression is not accidental. It reveals something about how truth unfolds in this story. It is not forced. It is experienced in stages, and each stage builds on the one before it. Now consider what this means. If this were designed simply to convince, the story would remove doubt quickly. It would present overwhelming evidence immediately. It would not allow hesitation to repeat itself, but instead, it allows doubt to surface again and again, only to be addressed through encounter, not pressure. And that makes the story stronger, not weaker, because it reflects something recognizable. People do not all believe at the same time. They do not all process the same way. They move at different speeds, through different experiences, toward the same realization. Now think about your own perspective again. If you were in that room, seeing what they saw, would it remove your doubt instantly? Or would you still question it, even for a moment? That hesitation is not a failure. It is part of how understanding forms when something challenges everything you thought was final. And this brings the focus back to where it began. The first witness, Mary, the one who saw before anyone else, the one who spoke before anyone else, the one who was not immediately believed. And yet, she was right. That detail no longer feels small. It feels foundational. Because it shows that truth does not depend on immediate acceptance to remain true. It simply waits until it is seen. So here is something to consider carefully. If the truth of something is not determined by how quickly people believe it, then what actually determines it? Write your answer in the comments. Because this question sits at the center of everything you've just seen. And what remains now is not doubt, but what you choose to do with what has been revealed. By now, the pattern is clear, but the meaning behind it is deeper than it first appears. What began with one unexpected witness has now expanded into multiple encounters, each one confronting doubt in a way that words alone never could. But the question that still remains is not just what happened. It's why it happened this way. Because nothing about this sequence follows what people would normally expect. The first witness was not chosen for influence. The message was not delivered in a way that forced immediate belief. Doubt was not removed instantly. Instead, everything unfolded step by step through real people, real reactions, and real moments of hesitation. And that forces you to look at this differently, not as a perfectly structured argument, but as something that happened without adjusting itself to meet human expectations. Mary saw first. Not because she was the most qualified, but because she stayed. That detail now carries more weight than it did at the beginning. Because when you follow the entire sequence, you realize something important. The difference between those who saw first and those who saw later was not intelligence, not strength, not position. It was proximity. It was presence. It was the willingness to remain when things stopped making sense. And that raises a question that goes beyond the story itself. How often do people walk away too early? How often do they step back at the exact moment something is about to change simply because it no longer fits what they expect? The disciples left the tomb with questions. Mary stayed with them. And that single decision placed her in the moment that changed everything. Now, connect this to what followed. She spoke and was doubted. They saw and believed. Thomas doubted and then saw. Each step building on the last, not removing doubt instantly, but confronting it directly. And that progression reveals something that cannot be ignored. This was not a moment designed to eliminate uncertainty in one instant. It was a moment that allowed people to move through uncertainty until they reached understanding. And that makes the story stronger because it reflects reality. People don't all believe at once. They don't all understand at the same time. They move through confusion, hesitation, and questions before clarity arrives. And that is exactly what happened here. Now step back one final time and look at the full picture. A sealed tomb, an empty space, a woman who stayed, a voice calling her name, a message delivered, doubt filling the room. Then encounter after encounter, until doubt could no longer stand on its own. This is not just a sequence of events. It is a pattern of transformation. And at the center of that pattern is a detail that most people overlook. The first witness. Not powerful, not expected, not immediately believed, and yet central to everything that followed. Now, here is where this connects to something even bigger. Because if you watched the previous video on this channel, the last 24 hours of Jesus, full timeline, you already know what led up to this moment. You saw the betrayal, the arrest, the trial, the cross, and the silence that followed. You saw how everything appeared to end, how every expectation collapsed, how even those closest to him were left in confusion and fear. And this moment is the answer to that silence. The story did not end at the cross. It paused, and what looked like finality became transition. That connection matters, because without the last 24 hours, this moment loses its weight. And without this moment, the last 24 hours remain unresolved. Together, they form one complete story. One that begins with what looks like defeat and moves into something no one expected. So if you haven't watched that first video yet, go back and watch it after this. Because when you see both together, the story becomes clearer, deeper, and far more powerful than either one alone. Now think about this personally. What part of this stayed with you the most? Was it the fact that the first witness was unexpected? Was it the doubt that followed, even after the truth was spoken? Or was it the way everything changed, not through force, but through encounter? Write your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know how you see this. And if this made you pause, think, or question something deeper, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone, because conversations like this don't just inform, they stay with people. And if you want more content that doesn't just repeat stories, but explores what they actually mean, subscribe to Truth Beneath Faith. This is just the beginning. Because the next question is even bigger. What happened after people started believing? How did this moment move from a small group to something that reached the world? That's where the story goes next. And once you see it, you won't look at this the same way again.